What if failure was a lie? And I'm not talking about the experience of failing. That's painfully real. I'm talking about the story that we tell ourselves about it, the one that says that failure is a final verdict on our talent, our worth, or our value. I want you to picture something for a moment. Scientists gather together a group of elite, peak-conditioned swimmers, and they give them some devastating news. They tell them that they just failed, that they weren't good enough. For one group, that news was a crushing blow, and their performance instantly fell apart. But for the other group, something really interesting happened. The news of that failure, it didn't just not break them, it did the exact opposite. It's like it unlocked a new level of success, and they started swimming better than they ever had before. So what was the difference between these two groups of elite athletes? Well, it all came down to a single core belief, an idea that made them seem almost immune to the idea of failure. And that's the secret that we're unpacking today, what that belief actually is, and more importantly, how you can use it to turn your own setbacks into fuel. This all comes from a landmark experiment by psychologist Martin Seligman, who's one of the founders of positive psychology. And here's what he did. He took a group of varsity swimmers from UC Berkeley, so world-class elite level athletes, and he had them swim their best event all out. And after they finished, totally exhausted, the coaches told them their times, but here's the twist. The coaches lied. They deliberately told the swimmers that their times were much slower than they actually were. So it was a brutal, simulated defeat. After a quick rest, they were told to get back in the water and do it all again, and this is where their two paths split. One group of swimmers, when they heard their bad time, they got back in the pool and swam even slower. So the fake failure became a real one, and the bad news just crushed their spirits, crushed their mindset, and their bodies just followed suit. Their performance completely cratered. But the other group, they did something that researchers didn't expect. After hearing the bad news, they got back in the pool and they swam faster. They actually beat their first time, which was a great time to begin with, but they just didn't know it. And so for them, that feedback of failure wasn't an anchor, it was a trigger, and it pushed them to a level that they didn't even know that they had. So what was the invisible force separating those who crumbled from those that conquered? Well, the researchers already knew because before the experiment started, they'd given each of the athletes a questionnaire designed to uncover one thing. That one thing is their deepest belief about adversity. So it was a test to see if they were a pessimist or an optimist. The secret wasn't just some vague power of positive thinking type thing. It was a specific trainable habit called explanatory style. Explanatory style is simply the way that you habitually explain to yourself why bad things happen. So it's those stories that we tell ourselves in moments right after a setback. And that story determines whether you feel helpless or whether you get resilient. Pessimists and optimists process failure through three different lenses, often called the 3 Ps, and they are permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. So let's talk first about the pessimist. The pessimist sees a bad event as number one, permanent. When they fail, that voice in their head says, this is gonna last forever. These things will never get better. Next, number two, they see it as pervasive. So in other words, this is gonna ruin everything. My whole life is a mess. And then finally, number three, and maybe most critically, they see it as personal. This is all my fault. I'm a failure. So it becomes this internal, stable, global disaster. And the swimmers that swam slower, they were the pessimists. They heard the slow time, and their internal story was probably something like, I'm just not a good swimmer, personal. I'm probably always gonna be slow, permanent, and this just proves that I'm not cut out for this. This is not my thing, pervasive. The optimists, on the other hand, told a completely different story. Their explanatory style leads them to see bad events as temporary. Their inner voice says something like, it's just a momentary setback, tomorrow's a new day. They see it as specific and not pervasive. Look, I had one bad race, it doesn't affect my career or the rest of my life. And most importantly, they see it as external and not personal. So they'll say things like, yeah, maybe the conditions were off, maybe I didn't sleep that well, or maybe it just was a fluke and wasn't my day. It's not a reflection of who I am. The swimmers who swam faster were optimists. Their story was probably something like, it was just a bad time, I maybe messed up on the turn, so external and specific, but maybe I can push a little bit harder and fix it on the next one, temporary. See, for them, failure wasn't a verdict, it was just feedback. It wasn't this tall, insurmountable wall, it was just a small hurdle. This optimistic explanatory style is the engine of invincibility. This engine is powered by something called the optimism bias, which is our brain's natural tendency to expect positive outcomes. It's the little voice in our head that makes us think that we're just a little bit more likely to succeed and a little bit less likely to face misfortune than most people. And while a reality check can be healthy, a good dose of this bias is fundamental to our well-being. It builds a kind of psychological armor, a mindset that lets us face challenges with confidence instead of fear. And look, this isn't just some self-help fluff. This has real biological consequences. Studies have linked an optimistic mindset to stronger immune system with higher levels of infection-fighting cells. Optimists also tend to show lower levels of chronic inflammation, which is a key in many diseases. And this all contributes to a really shocking statistic that on average, optimists live 11 to 15% longer than pessimists. So their outlook is directly connected to better health, better sleep quality, and even how they manage stress. And then from a performance standpoint, this bias is a strategic weapon. Optimists are simply better at handling stress. When they hit a wall, their brain doesn't get stuck in this endless loop of anxiety and self-doubt. Instead of burning out or hammering away at a goal that isn't working, they're more likely to just disengage, reassess, pivot their efforts. And it's this kind of mental flexibility that keeps them in the game. They don't quit, they just pivot. They see failure not as an attack on their ego, but as a non-personal, temporary, and specific problem to be solved. And that outlook transforms adversity, shielding them from the paralyzing effects of stress. This goes way beyond the swimming pool. Imagine two entrepreneurs who launch a new product and both fail to hit their initial sales goals. The pessimist immediately internalizes it. I knew I wasn't cut out for this. My idea sucks. I'm a fraud. For them, the failure is personal, pervasive, and permanent, and it feels like a judgment on their character, so the logical next step is just to give up. They're emotionally crushed. The optimist, facing the exact same numbers, has a totally different inner conversation. Okay, so this launch didn't go as planned. The market didn't respond to this version of the product. Can you see the difference there? The failure is external. It's about the market, not their personal worth. It's about this specific launch, not their entire career or their company, and it's temporary. This is feedback. What can we learn from it? How can we iterate and try a new approach? This mindset doesn't just feel better, it drives action. It leads to resilience, innovation, and ultimately a much higher chance of success. Think about getting passed over for a promotion. The pessimistic view is, well, I wasn't good enough. My boss doesn't value me. I'll be stuck here forever. That mindset will just lead to somebody checking out and ultimately a decline in performance. The optimist view, on the other hand, would say, the person that got the job maybe has more experience in this specific area. This shows me exactly what skills I need to build to be ready for the next opportunity. So one path leads to helplessness, the other leads to a growth plan. The event is exactly the same, but the story that we tell ourselves changes everything. Now, this ability to rewrite your failure stories is not some trait that you're born with. It's a skill, and before we get into the practical steps about how to build this optimistic mindset for yourself, if you're getting value from this, take a second to hit that subscribe button for me. We explore science-backed strategies just like this every single week to give you tools to reshape your life. Building learned optimism isn't about ignoring reality or chanting feel-good affirmations in the mirror. It's about systematically challenging your own unhelpful thoughts and replacing them with more productive ones. It's cognitive reframing, and the most powerful tool for this is Martin Seligman's ABCDE model. It starts with A for adversity. This is just the objective event, the failed test, the rejected proposal. So what you want to do is just simply state the facts. I didn't get the promotion, the proposal failed. The next step, B for belief. This is where you have to be honest. What's your immediate, automatic interpretation of what happened? Write that down. Write down that raw, pessimistic thought. I suck, my boss thinks I'm a failure, I'll be stuck here forever. Just get it all out. Then comes C, and C is for consequence. This is the feeling or action that results from that belief. I feel totally worthless and unmotivated. I don't want to put in any extra effort at work anymore. And this is where most of us stop. And if you stop here, you can see the state of mind that you're going to be in. But the magic is really in the next two steps. So D, the next step. D is for disputation. This is where you become a detective for your own mind. You actively argue against those pessimistic beliefs. Challenge the evidence. Look, wait a minute. Is this really true that I suck? I've led successful projects before. My last performance review was actually really positive. Then challenge the permanence. Is it true that I'll be stuck here forever? Or is this just one moment in a long career? and then find other explanations. Look, maybe the other candidate was just a little bit better fit for this exact role at this exact time. And finally, E is for energization. So after you've successfully argued against the pessimistic belief, how do you feel? You should feel a sense of relief, a renewed control, and the motivation to really take action. Okay, so now I see this isn't a life sentence. I'm gonna schedule a meeting with my boss, ask for specific feedback, and create a plan to build the skills I need for the next opportunity. So practicing this ABCDE method, it's like taking your brain to the gym. It'll feel a little bit forced at first, but with repetition, you can actually start to change the way you default to those thought patterns. You catch those negative beliefs in real time and challenge them automatically. You're literally training your brain to see setbacks not as dead ends, but as detours with a map to a better route. The swimmers that got faster, they weren't superhuman. They simply had trained their minds as rigorously as they trained their bodies. They built a belief system that made failure powerless. Look, failure is an inevitable part of doing anything meaningful. You will experience it. The world will hand you bad news, but the power of that failure to define you, to stop you in your tracks, that's not inevitable. That is a power that you grant it. Your explanatory style, the story you tell yourself about why you fail, is the single most important factor in your resilience. By choosing to see setbacks as temporary, specific, and external, you don't just bounce back, you use the impact as a springboard. You build a psychological immunity that protects you from the emotional damage of failure and lets you extract all the valuable lessons that can be buried inside. You learn to fail forward, and when you can do that, you become practically unstoppable. If this idea resonated with you, hit that like button and maybe share in the comments a time that a setback actually led to a surprising success. I'll be interested to hear some of those stories. So guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.